and look at his bio, check his bio online.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good afternoon, PK.
Good afternoon, man.
What really bothers me in this season is to see that there's so much talk about the private sector and there's so much talk about the public sector, assisting the public sector. But when we look
Yes.
at the private sector, the reason why private education is thriving is because the public sector has failed.
Yes.
Now there's so much talk. I sent you a document which I'm sure quite a few of us have seen it.
Yes.
The new future for education by
Yes.
UNESCO, the
Yes.
International Commission for the Futures of Education, and we're going to be
Yes.
focusing more on that. You know,
Great.
because
Great.
one of the things that I've also been asking myself is, what's the future of education? What is the future of education? Where are we going with this? You know, because we know that Henry Adams says, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence is going to, you know, where it's going to stop, where it's going to end.
Yes.
And we know that
Yes.
teachers are very, very powerful. So
Yes.
in what do you see education? We started this conversation a couple of weeks ago, but
Yes.
we couldn't conclude as it were.
Yes.
So I want us to go straight into it, and let's talk about the future of education. What's the futures?
Yes.
They have called it futures.
Yes, they call it the futures. It's an interesting discourse, I must say. Very, very interesting. And I pray that our audience today is really ready for the conversation, because there's no way to discuss education in the world without speaking to the soul of its stakeholders, right? There are so many ways that we can continue to put lip service to the idea of education and never achieving the results. So if we look at the document from UNESCO, you have 1.5 billion students right now in the world.
Yeah.
1.5 billion students. And I noted some basic questions. How many of these students will make it to the top of the triangle, right? So when you look at the concept of education, you have, if you look at it from the point of view of, or the analogical context of a triangle, you know, the point of entry at the bottom seems to be what everybody is running for. And that old document, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm happy that it's going to form like the instrument for this conversation. But quite frankly, every time we gather to say we want to address the issue of education, you know, the place of education, the rights to education, and all of that, what we do is we are talking about the bottom of that triangle, right? Because few people at the bottom of that triangle are going to make it to the top of that triangle. And what I mean by that is that at the end of the day, we just realize that we are educating, as it were, a very small, tiny fraction of the population in the world. And those guys go ahead to lead our corporations, to lead our institutions, to lead our governments, you know, and our organizations, businesses, and all of that. However, they are going to be providing leadership for a critical mass, billions of other people who don't have the privilege of the education that they have. But you see, it means at the end of the day, on one hand, there's this hypocritical selection where we are trying to empower everybody, but the system of delivering that empowerment consistently works to empower, to put a few at the top. So at the end of the day, when you maximize the value of education, you know, you find that it produces a few who are going to provide leadership for the masses. Is that wrong in itself? That's a symposium discussion in future. But what we can do today is to say, okay, if they provide leadership for us, particularly if you look at the government level, then there has to be a level of awareness amongst the masses who pretty much permit the leaders to evolve. So I don't mind you leading me. I have no problem with anyone leading me. But I want to be able to decide who that person is. I want to play a key part in who that person is. Therefore, there is a minimum level of awareness that I need to have to be able to make that choice. Now, the moment I don't have that awareness, I'm not making a choice. My choice is arrested because my ignorance leaves me incapable of making that choice. Then the system that give me the options to choose from will give me the options that they choose and they evolve. And so they've arrested my choice. Okay. So the first question for me is, when we say education, what do we really mean by education? The report that we read, spoke about the core principles, our core principles and known strength. Our core principles and known strength. And as far as I'm concerned, those core principles and known strength, are probably the instrument for perpetuating the problem in itself. And I'm going to try and explain what I mean. So we have biases in the world, for example, like girl education. The reports of the UNESCO spoke seriously about girl education. I have some other questions there. My bigger questions there is, how do we identify a problem that we want to solve? And then in trying to solve that problem, we we create another problem. So if we put all our budgets and all our focus on girl education, then what is going to happen to the boy? So if we say the boy has been in charge for a very long time, we can flip it and look for a silver lining by saying, okay, that's a testimonial. How do we make sure that we don't now get the boy ignorant again? So let's keep the awareness of the boy so that we just inspire it and guide it while we educate the girl. Because if we are not careful, we are going to educate the girl again at the expense of the boy, and in the future we're going to be speaking of boy education again. How do we get the boy educated? You see? So on one hand, the people who agitate for girl education are probably the same people who are going to say we should teach our boys not to rape. But how do you keep that education going if you're not going to have an equal commitment to educate the boy and the girl? So you are not going to ever have the luxury of making a choice between girl education and boy education. We are going to continue to invest equally in both. The investment in boy education could be to sharpen, to guide, to reorientate, or whatever it is, but it will not require less investment. And then the girl child will require our own investment as well, so that we are not creating an alternative for gun, an opportunity cost, so to say, every time we have to make incursion into an area. You see, those are questions in that block. The other question is, when we say words, when we use phrases like intelligent collective action, what do we mean? What do we mean by intelligent collective action? Do we lack it? Have we lacked it before? Is it that we lack that intelligent collective action? Did COVID necessitate it? So, for example, this report was written in 2019, pre-COVID. And then should we pretend that it wasn't written pre-COVID? And then are we going to accept it as a document for COVID? Everybody is still learning in COVID. That document obviously cannot be adequate for all that we have to inquire. It's too early. And a lot of its contents were created pre-COVID. The impact of COVID is another symposium discussion, and we are all still learning what that impact is going to be. So when we say intelligent collective action, what exactly do we mean? So I'm asking questions like, have we lacked that intelligent collective action before? Did COVID necessitate that, or did COVID necessitate it? Have we always needed it? These are questions. Have we always needed it? Or what really is the problem? Already as I talk to you today, there's too much infighting between governments and too much distrust between governments for any collective, organization. So you find that governments don't even want to work together. Everybody is focused on interest. There's a lot of geopolitics behind the scene that we will be doing ourselves a disservice if we don't acknowledge in architecting a solution. So part of that is, for example, how is Europe and America going to trust Asia? How is China going to earn its trust in Europe and in North America? And then you find, for example, if you look at COVID itself, almost everyone is looking for his own vaccine, because really the level of distrust at that level is huge. It's really huge. So if we go further and we say to ourselves, so what is going to happen when government, renegade on their decisions to cooperate? Are we at the mercy of governments across the globe? A whole United Nations is refused to play its role in funding the World Health Organization, because all of those things that we call collective action are all sensitive to interest. The Americans have their foreign policy, they have their interests. The Chinese have their interests. The Africans have to come up with something. The so-called third world nations have to come up with something, because the idea is all of these actions are subject. Who's going to arrest the United States now for not participating with World Health Organization? Who's going to arrest them? So it's just imagine if there's an entire strategy that is tied around WHO, and then the US is pulling out, is funding. That is going to crash a lot of the plans and sincere, commitments that are tied to that funding. So when the destiny of a constituency is tied to the sanity of a third party or a second party, it becomes unreliable. Everyone has to be the architect of his own destiny, and we have to ask questions about those types of empowerment. And by that, I am not saying we should ignore all of the structures as we have them, but there is an expanded view that we are going to get to in this conversation that I think we should add to all of these things. There are other questions. When you look at academic science, government, business, education, and all of that, there's a big question that we keep neglecting, which is, what is education? For example, in the development space, you find that there are so many donor agencies coming to Africa to empower different non-profits, different social enterprises, and all of that. But when you look at it, there is a few set of people, very few. There's a minority that have mastered the requirement for assessing this funding, right? So at the end of the day, they know there is a higher level of ignorance, behind, right? That a lot of people that keeps a vast majority of the people who need these solutions, this funding out. Then there is a minority that understand the requirements, how they need to organize, how they should present themselves, and they keep getting the funding. So at the end of the day, the big donors are funding the same people. Again and again through different organizations. So I apply for funding here, I get it. I apply for the next funding, I get it. I know what to say. I know the narratives. I know the scripts. I know how to present myself. I know how to put my paper out. So I can get funding again and time and again from different organizations. And then you have a lot of people at the bottom who really don't have the awareness, the education, the clarity to be able to assess that. And the reason for that is simple. So for example, we have formal education. How many people in Africa, for example, have access to formal education? Even in the United States. If you look at the percentage of people that go through the entire gamut of a process of formal education from kindergarten all the way to tertiary institution and probably postgraduate and all of that, you compare that number to those in the informal sector who probably ended all they have to do after high school and decided to go do something else. If you look at that percentage, there's a gap. But the difference is the guy who does not go beyond high school in the United States is educated already. Now, any other thing you put on that is a definition of his own mastery or his area of expertise if you choose to go there. But in third world environment, for example, that model is not working. Once you have not gone, even if you go all the way to the university, you still don't have a level playing field. You still don't have a direct chance that you will succeed. In the United States, the system, in many first world countries, the system are built to recognize and to reward every iota of talent and gifting. Once you have a will and a desire to win, the system is available to give you the attention and the resources your individuality deserves. Now, you don't have that in Africa. And so we have the informal sector. And there's a lot of ignorance. I won't say literacy. There's a lot of ignorance in the informal sector. If you did not make it to the university, for example, if you go as far as the university in Nigeria, for example, you still may not know anything. The curriculum is faulty, ab initio. And then by the time you go down to those who did not go all the way to the university, they probably are going to speak bad grammar, weak English, or weak French, or weak Portuguese, whatever it is that they have adopted as their lingua franca. They're going to speak a pidgin version of it. And pidgin is not supposed to be an embarrassment. Pidgin is a proof of a people's struggle with an original language. There's nothing wrong with it. There are so many people in the world who don't speak good English who have PhDs because it's not their natural language. It's not their native language. But you see, if you have the guy in Africa where English language is his lingua franca, and so English language is also a determinant of progress. So regardless of his quality of thinking, regardless of his level of awareness, if he cannot speak the best grammar, if he doesn't know the difference between a pronoun and an adjective, between a clause and a phrase, it's not going to progress in his own country. It's not going to marry the girl of his dreams. It's not going to be able to do so many things because it fails the test of technicality, not of essence, not of meaning, not of purpose. And then you find the same thing in Francophone countries. You find all of that everywhere. So this guy is not going to progress. And so he finds himself as an electrician or as a carpenter, and the system has a low level economically for rewarding labor, unlike his counterpart who is a plumber. A plumber in America can drive a Mercedes Benz. A plumber in Africa will never dream of driving a Mercedes Benz. You see, because it will never be rewarded for the investment of time and energy and skills that he put into his work. You see, so there must be another type of education. For example, in Africa, we complain a lot that, people sell votes, people buy votes, and politicians will go and then there are donors in the West and in America who are giving funding for organizations to, sorry, I just came from my exercise and all of that, so I'm sweating. So you have people who are giving funding to non-profits in Africa to make campaign about those selling your votes. The reason why these votes are being sold is stomach infrastructure, like it's called in Nigeria. People are hungry. Somebody needs food. So it doesn't have the opportunity to participate in his own economic destiny. And then it doesn't have the awareness that will qualify him for respect within the system. And then he's hungry. It's just like a police officer. The police officer is hungry. He's as hungry. The police officers in Nigeria, for example, grew up in the same environment that armed robbers grew up. So armed robbers grew up maybe somewhere in a remote area in Mushi, in Lagos, in Nigeria, or in some city in Accra, or in some city in Johannesburg. The police officer also evolved from that community. He has just made a better choice in dignity to be a police officer, but is subjected to the same hunger, to the same economic harshness, economic disequilibrium that forced the armed robber to go and pick a gun to begin to rob people. He too pick a gun to protect people. But you see, by the time he gets to the system, and he cannot protect his own children, he cannot have security for his own future. His salary is not paid consistently. He has no insurance if he dies on the streets and killed by armed robbers. And then his pension is not going to be paid regularly anyway if he amounts to anything. The naira is being devalued on a daily basis, and his leaders are betraying him on a daily basis, and now they run the economy. How do you expect that gentleman not to, because there is a madness in almost everybody. The pressure you are privileged or blessed not to experience or to experience will determine how you manifest that madness. So when you put people under intense pressure, you are placing a demand on their, on their spontaneity. And when they don't have the training and the exposure to regulate behavior and to insist on doing the right things, right, then they have a problem. So what type of education should we be talking about? And I want to define it. I think the education we should be talking about should transcend the limits of academia. It should transcend the limits of academics. Education has to be the ability of the human life or the human mind, deep in its solical contents, to experience its environment, to be able to question it enough to find the options that exist in that environment, and to know the ones to embrace as a matter of supreme importance and urgency. I'll take it again. Education has to be the ability of the human soul or the human life to experience its environment, to be able to question it deep enough to find the options that exist in it, and to know the ones to embrace as a matter of supreme importance and urgency. Now, if you have a PhD and you cannot do that, you are past the test of academics. You have failed that of education. You are still not educated if you cannot receive stimulus, experience your environment, if you cannot question it enough to find options in it, and if you don't have the clarity to know the ones to embrace as a matter of supreme importance and urgency. Now, by that definition, so many people are not educated. And then that is the education we need to think of, so that I don't need to have a BSc to prove I'm educated. If I can do that, and I didn't go to school at all, if I don't have the privilege of formal education, but I can do that, even if I can do it through my native language or my street knowledge, right? In an informal setting, an informal structure, then I am educated. That is the capacity where I can understand jobs and GDP. When somebody is campaigning and is talking to me about winning, and is talking to me about jobs, about GDP, about the economy, you know, and I can understand what he's saying, though I did not have the privilege of formal education, then our societies are educated. And I think that that is the type of investment we need to begin to make, and stop emphasizing the limits of academics as the proof of education. That is only providing people at the top of the triangle, continue to create a vicious ignorance at the bottom of that triangle, and that inequality will continue forever. That's what I believe.
Okay, well, what the challenge is that a lot of it's part of our culture. Academics is part of our culture. To take academics out to be a very huge task.
No, we're not going to take it out. We're not going to take it out. First of all,
let me rephrase that and say that,
okay,
to de-emphasize academics.
Yes.
The challenge is, how do we de-emphasize academics?
Great. That's a very good question.
Yes, because now, I've asked this question and everybody's saying, look, it's almost impossible in Nigeria and in Africa generally. But I believe that it's possible.
It's very possible. It's very possible.
Very possible. It starts from the teacher.
Yes.
It starts from the curriculum experts. It starts from us as individuals. I mean, so much talk about, you know, it starts from the adults, you know, it starts from the adults, you know, the issue of rape, the issue of racism. It starts with you. It starts with you know, myself.
Correct.
For me, and a lot has to do with, you know, leveraging on personal social responsibility. There's something that's called the responsible adult.
Yes.
And from what you have said, it's a lot more in that line. How can we begin to make those changes to de-emphasize academics and begin to, you know, emphasize more important issues of equality in the ability of everybody being able to read, able to understand the economics, being able to, you know, at grassroots level. And I think that, I mean, from what I've seen so far, a bit is being done in Nigeria, but not so much so. For instance, I was expecting that we would actually take cue, since we're taking cue on COVID, with regards to, you know, medications and protocols and all that, face masks, use your face mask, that we will take a bit of cue on what they are also doing in their education space.
Yes.
But I don't see that happening.
No, unfortunately, there is a classification in the education space. You see, let's be clear about some basic things. In Africa, for example, we must understand that education, formal education, has always been a determinant of progress. In fact, at a time in Africa, the ability to speak English or French was a major advantage in the society. Because when you can speak English, you are a nationalist of some sort. It doesn't matter to what degree. Once you can speak English, you can understand the white man. You can interpret the white man. You can communicate with the white man. You are either his clerk, or you are going to be his interpreter. You are going to be close to him. You are going to have access to him, or you are going to represent your people in some way or the other. Your role naturally becomes representative, and that is a thin line, you know. the other side of that, just a thin fence, is to become a nationalist. Just because, even if you don't have any passion for nationalism, just because you are the one that can communicate with the white man and represent your people, automatically you become a nationalist of some sort because you are representing the yearnings and the aspirations of your people. And that is how most of our nationalists evolve. It's not really for any test of passion or vision, but essentially, as far as in the 40s, right? Africa did not have 800 graduates in the whole of Africa, in the entire continent. We didn't have 800 graduates, 800. In fact, as at the 50s, I'm not sure of the year, but I think 1950 something, I just missed the year, there were less than 20 graduates in the whole of northern Nigeria, for example. You know, if they are up to 10. You see, so you see that at that point in time, the advantage you have to progress in society was the ability to speak English. And so, whether we like it or not, there is when something becomes a standard for progress, then the ease of assessing it is also standardized. Such that everybody will not be able to access it because the custodians of it will not want to create equality because commonality is a level playing field. The only reason why wisdom is still valuable to us today is because it is rare. It is rare. Somebody has to be foolish for wisdom to continue to have value, whether we like it or not. Okay. If everybody can access wisdom, wisdom will be meaningless. The premium we place on accessing it will be meaningless.
Like someone is asking here now that progress, yes. How do you define, you know, is asking for an operational definition of progress?
Yes. Progress for me is simple. We progress collectively when every iota of talent, of gifting, of resource, of desire, will, receives the attention and the resources that it deserves. So regardless of my color, just because of the gift of nature, and because I identify with a particular geography, right? And I'm able to play my role that is apportioned to me in that society. For example, I'm not a criminal, I pay my tax, I work very hard. Once I am making those type of contributions, then there must be an attempt by the top of the triangle, who I have given the responsibility to make laws for me, to organize the use of my tax that I'm paying, to put structure in place. If I put my destiny in the hands of those people, it is their duty to ensure that if I have a commitment to succeed, I should not be hindered by anything that is no fault of mine. So, for example, I am from Remo in Ogun State in Nigeria. I live in Dallas. Now, it's not my fault that I am from Remo. Now, if I am not able to speak English very well, it doesn't mean I cannot think. I should not be held responsible. No Englishman will be held responsible for not being able to speak French, for not being able to speak Swahili, or not being able to speak Zulu. No Englishman will be held responsible or will be hindered in any way. No American will be hindered. No German will be hindered for his inability to speak Mandarin or to speak, English or to speak French. And internationally, nobody judges a Nigerian, for example, or a Ghanaian or a South African for his inability to speak English. They understand that you are not an English person, and so you are going to have to struggle with pidgin, and they understand that. So they can get to an interpreter. The Chinese man does not speak correct English anywhere he is in the world, but he's the second largest economy in the whole world. And everybody understands that. But in our own country, we hold ourselves to standards that nobody else outside is holding ourselves to. So if I say good morning, I'm come now. I'm go after this session, and then I'm coming. You understand what I'm saying? You don't need to focus on the technicality of what I'm saying. The goal of language is communication. Even the goal, the objective of lingua franca is communication, not sophistication. If I say I'm go, once you understand me, I've passed. I don't need to say I have to go now. I'm going now. I don't need to say that. That is defeating. That is now making it elitist, and it's having a sophistication to it that, quite frankly, I cannot guarantee that I will pass if Providence does not put me in the right family. So give me that sophistication. If Providence does not put me in the right school, give me the right teacher, the right neighbor, the right parents to give me that sophistication, then I'm doomed. So if I say church instead of church, instead of saying we are in charge here, if I say we are in charge here, I'm going to struggle economically. People are going to judge me by that. Girls will not even talk to me. Some boys will mock me. There are jobs I will not get just because I cannot say she. And it's not my fault. That is an embarrassment of nature. If anybody is going to be blamed, that is not my fault. So we have to think. Sorry, ma'am.
I said those things can be corrected.
Yeah, well, for some people, but the question is, why do I need to correct it? Because when you look at it, why do I need to correct? Does it affect the way I think? What irritation does it give you? Because I say charge, I say I'm in charge. Don't you understand what I'm saying? Why should that? Why should I need to regulate my own design for your own comfort? I don't need to. The German is not under that pressure. The American is not under that pressure. There's a part of my energy you are forcing me to invest in that direction. And by the time I have maybe 10 rounds of energy, and I'm going to put through in mastering your own language, and you, your own children, are going to invest the whole 10 in expressing themselves. Out of that 10, 2 of it is already distracted. I'm going to invest in trying to master your language. How do I beat you? How do I even compete with you? It's like from day one, I'm brought in dead. I'm brought in disadvantage. So for me, that is progress. When we eliminate for example, I am not making a case. I'm not making a case for the elimination of English language. Neither am I making a case for the even. I'm not even going to use the word de-emphasize academics. What I'm saying is academics should not be a determinant of progress. That is my point.
Okay.
It should not be a determinant of progress. It should be an alternative in the system, so that somebody who chooses to give himself to that will have a career. If I'm blessed with another type of talent and I can express myself all the way and gain market penetration and traction in the market, that I should be blessed with that. So what that means, for example, is, for example, I think it's too late to eliminate English language as lingua franca in, say, Anglophone countries in Africa, for example. I think it's too late. So I'll tell you what we cannot do. We cannot eliminate it. 50 years of adopting a pattern has probably become second nature. So we can accept that. But I'll tell you what we can do. What we can then do is to legislate, for example, and say that we have to, what do we have why do we have professors, PhD holders, master's degree holders for? We can correct the test of intelligence. We can correct, the standards of measuring, intelligence and character.
That's my exact point to certain teachers when I say to them, look, when you are teaching children in your classroom, how do you mark, how do you assess that this child understands what you have taught?
Yes.
By correcting every spelling mistake. Because if you are wasting time correcting every spelling mistake, you will probably not focus on what that child.
You will not. You will not, actually.
You won't. So I agree with you that we cannot. The legislation is at every level.
And I'll tell you something else we can do. I'll tell you something else we can do. Since it's not my fault that I cannot speak, I'm from Remo. If I cannot speak Remo language, if I cannot say Eswe, if I cannot speak my Remo language, shame on me. And I can be judged by my people for that. But I cannot be judged for not being able to speak English. That is not my language. So what does that mean? But my country that has, decided to bring all of us together, has accepted us as one country. Now, that is not my fault. I didn't make that choice. Remember, I'm not only from Remo. I did not also make the choice to be in Nigeria. Some people made that decision for me. Number two, I did not choose English language. Some people make that choice for me. Now, if you have foisted on me a way of defining my destiny, then it is your duty to make sure that access to that instrument is easy for me.
Available.
So therefore, you can't make me to qualify to learn a language I did not choose. You have to be able to bring it to me free of charge. I should not learn English language. I can pay for physics. I can pay to learn chemistry. I can, because I don't need English language to learn all those subjects. I can pay to learn economics. I can pay to learn government, but I shouldn't pay to learn English. Neither should I qualify to learn it. So you must bring English language to me. Why don't we have free English language centers in every local government? In every local government, free. And then English language should not be part of our grading. Yeah, so I was just saying that we can also remove those barriers and make English language accessible to me. And then so you bring it to me as a right. Part of my human rights as a citizen is that you made the choice to make English language my lingua franca. I didn't make that choice. It becomes your duty to make sure I am able to learn it without any hindrance whatsoever. So you got to put English language centers in every local government, beyond the walls of academics, beyond the walls of academia, rather. You have to put that center available to every Nigerian. You can even make it compulsory. If you make it compulsory, but it is free, if it's a qualification, for example, and then you must have classroom hours. So you have to also, apart from making it compulsory, you have to reduce the bar. The bar of learning it is not to master it. You must eliminate mastery from that curriculum. What you want to put there is use and engagement. Every Nigerian should be able to speak a form of English and understand it enough to exchange, not to master it. So I don't need to go and master verbs, adverbs, and adjectives, and pronouns, and summary, and phrase, and clause, and all of those technicalities. You are forcing me to pass the test of technicality. You see? So if you do that, you have to make a law to ensure that, one, I have access to it. Two, I don't have to qualify to learn it. Three, I don't have to pay to learn it. Four, you know, I don't have to master it. I don't have to master it. So if I say I'm wake up now and then I rush quickly to New York and then I back tomorrow and then me call you. I mean, you see Indians here every day, executives. Every day. I see Indians here, executives. They're speaking terrible grammar. Terrible grammar.
Why we are so, I think it's just the culture. I think the culture of us as Africans wanting to be the best and, you know, wanting to.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a culture of inferiority. I think it's a complex. Okay. I actually think it's a complex. And you and I today, you and I are people of, you and I are a generation of out of civilization. So there's a lot. We don't know. We are not trying to master English language because we want to impress anybody. It's just what we received. So if you want to understand what culture is it, we have to go back to the guys who adopted it, our fathers who taught us, our ancestors who brought it down to our level. Why did it, just like, you know, so why did we receive it? By the time you go to that history, you can understand the foundation. And when the foundation is faulty, what can the righteous do? I'm sorry to quote the scripture. The foundation is faulty. English language should not be a determinant of progress. Number 7 is that you also have to ensure that nobody is going to disqualify me from getting me a job because I cannot speak the best grammar. Meaning that the academia must evolve. Number 1, another way of testing intelligence that transcends the limits of grammar. Number 2, they must also evolve it for corporate Africa. Corporate Africa must have another way of judging whether I am smart enough to get a job or not. And English language cannot be one of that standards. The metrics for assessing that cannot have English language in it. You see, once I can speak, if there's pidgin in every language, there's pidgin French, pidgin Portuguese, there's pidgin English, pidgin Yoruba, there's pidgin Igbo, there's pidgin Swahili, there's pidgin Zulu.
BBC now
Pidgin
section.
Pidgin is the proof of a people's struggle with an original language. It's not an inferiority expression. So the Indian who is struggling to speak great English is not inferior. He's a great technological expert. It's an incredible visionary and a awesome manager. But he is not just a master of English. So how do you assess his strength, which is intangible, without covering him with a shell of grammar? Because the shell is like the polythene that you put a biscuit in. You put a biscuit in a package. How do you celebrate or question the package and forget about the biscuit inside it? How do you debate and discuss the packaging of the biscuit and forget the biscuit? The biscuit is our goal, not the packaging of the biscuit. The packaging of the biscuit is to lead us to the biscuit, for God's sake. What we have done is we have called container content and we have called content container. And there's a big difference anywhere in the world between content and container. Container should be our content should be our focus, not container. Container is a means to accessing the content. The content is not a means for accessing the container. We have to understand that and know how to defend those brackets.
There's a question here that links to what you're just talking about. It says that millions of kids risk being left behind in Africa due to the impact of COVID, which we all know, particularly because of the online learning that's quite a number of them and don't have access to. Says, what are the solutions? Do you have any solutions?
Well, the solutions are clear. I mean, stakeholders in the education space must embrace, the fact of the flatness of learning, which means we have to go online. We have to embrace more of online learning and all of that and get used to it, because I don't think it's going away. And I've told everyone that cares to listen that COVID is not, we should stop discussing the elimination of COVID. We should start discussing the coexisting with COVID, right? It will give us more control, to keep us more realistic. It will give us more options to play with, but we have to accept learning in its elastic format, which is technology, as much as we can. But I also want to say COVID is also an incredible opportunity to question all that we have known. We should not try to, like the document is trying to ask us to strengthen our core principles and known strength. I don't think we should strengthen our core principles and known strength. I think we should question it. I think we should disrupt it. I think it's time. COVID is asking us to question. You see, I insist that document, a critical part of the conversation that created the UNESCO report, was created pre-COVID. A critical part of that conversation. And so this is the thing that we do. We just pass the test of technicality, throw documents around for people who can read and write, and then we should not question it. So the UNESCO is expecting us, you and I, to pretend that we don't know that COVID is a 2020 phenomenon. And these guys, even the CIA, the biggest organization in the world, did not see COVID coming. Are you telling me that those guys in that committee saw COVID coming and they had a discussion to prepare for COVID? They are just trying to, it's called tokenism. It's called tokenism. We just try to put something out there for the masses. People have been paid. People have been paid. What has happened to them is that the thing they have done is labor laws. COVID has disrupted all of that commission. That is the reality. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be defiant or rude, but COVID has disrupted these 9 things we have put here. So these things are not they don't immune us to anything going on in COVID. We are still learning, as a matter of fact, what COVID is. And we need that humility to understand that. You see? I'm sure when we come back in the next session, I'm already 3 minutes. I need to go now for my other session. Then we come back in the next session.